Let's take a few examples of ES modules. ES modules essentially stands for ECMAScript modules, and it is also abbreviated as ESM, short for ES modules. ES modules, we earlier saw that, let's say a library we are importing, then we could import import some variable from that library. We can do that, right? So we saw that. Let's try to use that syntax. So obviously there is no foo. Obviously there is no foo.js, because right now we are just trying to require not require, import. Yeah, so we are trying to import any variable from this thing, do dash. Right now just nothing to do, just print, let's say this should be a function, right? So just type of, that should be sufficient, no need to call it. The problem is that it will not run, because you can see that cannot use import outside a module. It is saying that it is not a module, and we'll see later actually that we can change the file name to mjs, and then if we run, then you see that it runs perfectly. However, we don't want to have some file names mjs, some file names js. That's why even mjs stands for module javascript, right? JavaScript modules. But we can run JavaScript modules even without that, but there is a small tweak needed. So right now, just a minute. Right now, if we run js thing, then obviously it is saying that cannot use import outside a module. But what you have to do is that you have to go to package json, and then you have to write type, and type you have to write module. So you see that if you don't write anything, by default common js will be used, so you don't need to write type common js. But in case of modules, javascript module, you need to use this module thing. Okay, so if you write type module and then you run the same code, then you see that now it is running perfectly, which means that now and how this is working, like this is like independent script. What it has to do with our package json. We are not using like any npm start, npm run. Then why it is happening like this? What happens actually is that wherever the script is there and whatever you are running, from there it will keep on going to parent folders till the time it finds first package json, first package.json. And wherever it finds first package.json, there it should have that type module. That is the way, and that's how it decides that whether it supports common js or ES modules. The thing is that if type is not there, or let's say common JS is there, then by default common JS is supported. But for modules, you have to add type module. Okay, and you can see that src is a folder. Inside src, this script is there. In its parent folder, package JSON is there, and that's why it's the most recent in the hierarchy. In the closest parent which has a package JSON is this package JSON only, and that's why it works. Okay, so we saw that this works, just that small tweak we have to do in packages, and that is fine. Now we'll start looking at that part where the importing thing is not being done of simply a library rather than a local file. Okay, so here foo.js is a local file, and let's say we have to import something from this file. So rather than this, we do something like this. Okay, now so we have to give some name. So let's give some name. So yeah, so let's take the first syntax. First syntax is that actually you can so you can export. So firstly you have to export, then only you can import, right? So there in common, yes, we saw module dot exports dot foo is equal to bar. Here you can simply do something like export whatever variable is there. So export const foo is equal to whatever bar. If this is there, then this variable is available to be imported from here, right? And then now if you print foo, then you will get bar. So you can understand that this is a syntax. This is the syntax. uh, you cannot do something like this. So instead of this, you cannot do something like this. You see that it is showing syntax error. You cannot do something like this, though you could do something like this. This is fine, this will still work. So why is that? So first thing you have to understand that when you are doing using this syntax export and this curly braces, this is not object. This is like completely different thing. It's like somebody says you that this thing is this an object. No, this is not an object. This is a syntax of import. It has nothing to do with JavaScript objects. Similarly, if you try to do something like foo5 or something, then you're trying to create an object. This is not an object. This is like exporting that variable. This is a separate syntax, and that's why that syntax does not work. But this is allowed. So either you can use something like this, or you can use something like this. Both are fine. Okay. So you can see that, yeah, foo variable is exported, and then you can import that and you can use that. So yeah, that is fine. Next, ESM import statements must be at the top of a module file. Must be at the top of a module file. Now, if you don't have it at the top of the module file, right? So let's say I do something like this. You can see that then also it works. Why it works? Because it does sort of hoisting automatically, even if it is like below, automatically internally it is raised to the top, and that's why it is working fine. Okay, so even if you write it below, it will not give you error, but you understand that internally all the import statements are taken and hoisted. That is the behavior. Okay, so the import statements are hoisted to the top by the JS parser, and that's why it still works. But technically you can write some other statements before import, but actually import is like then at the time of parsing, import is considered at the top. Let's consider this example. This is not allowed. This is not allowed. So we saw earlier that require statements can be added inside a for inside callback, but import statements cannot be. Again, import has a very simple rule. It should be at the top level. Top level means it cannot be inside some block or something, inside condition or something. It has to be at the top level. Top level means root level, and you assume that it is at the top level and top of the file also. Top level means leftmost, it cannot be nested, and topmost means it is always at the top. Even if it is not at the top, then you consider that it is at the top, because automatically it will be hoisted to the top. Okay, so that is the behavior. And something like this, it will give error. Something like this was not giving error, it was silently making it to the top. But if you do something like this, it will properly give you error and it will crash your code. Next, again, like import statements, export statement must also be at the top of the file, right? Export also cannot be inside some if condition or inside some callback. You cannot have. Export also must be. So this is error. This is also error. No callback, no nesting at the top level. And here it should be at the bottom of the file, because it is export, right? The convention is at the bottom of the file. Okay. Next, let's see this situation. Export const foo 5 export const. So there are multiple variables now. Now, like one variable, you can import multiple variables also, like foo bar, both you can import, right? Okay, so foo is 5, bar is hello. That is fine. Now, one more thing is that if something is not exported, then you cannot import it. You understand? So as long as something is exported, so foo is fine, foo bar is fine. So let's say foo is 5 and bar is hello, right? So let's change to that only. That is fine until the time it is exported. Let's, for reference, let's have this. Till the time it is exported, it can be imported. But if something is not exported and you try to import, then it will not give undefined or something. It will properly give you error that it does not provide, it has not exported bar, but you are trying to access bar. It must export bar, otherwise it will give you error. However, if you export and don't use, that is fine. That is obviously fine, because yeah, maybe it is used by some other file. It is fine. Okay, so that is the thing. One another variation is that, let's say I don't want to write foo bar, and let's say there are 30 properties. I don't want to write each and every like this. I want to have one object and it should have everything. Turns out in require, in CommonJS, you saw that yeah, you could have just a simple variable like this here, and that had all the object, right? In ES modules, that will not work. Why? Because here, as we will see later, simply writing this thing has a separate meaning, and this is called something called default export. So whatever is default exported, so as we will see later, that this is normal export, there is some other thing called export default, and then you can again export anything. So let's say hello or something, right? Now, and you don't need to give any name. Now if you print obj, so let's print obj. Then you will see that you are getting hello, whatever is default exported. Now, where is this foo bar gone? Foo bar is actually still can be accessed like that only. That is the only way in which it is accessed, right? So inside curly braces, whatever is there, that is your named exports. They are called named exports. So foo and bar is named because exactly that name is being used. This obj is not a named export, it is called default export, and default export, as you can see, that you have not given any name. So whatever name you want, you can give. Obj xxx, obj pqr, whatever you give, that is fine, and it will work. Okay. Okay, now you see, so let's change it something. So let's change it hello world or something, just for the sake of clarity. So this is default export is hello world, and then this is 5 and hello. Okay, now let's say for right now there is no default export, there is no default export. Then you are getting something like this, right? And that is bad. Actually, you there can be 20 such variables. You don't want to write all of them. So there is a syntax, something like this: star as obj or star as abc, whatever you write, then everything will come inside that. So foo, instead of foo bar, if you write star as, let's say, abc, and then you print abc, then you will see that you have got your foo and bar inside abc, which means that you can write abc.foo, abc.bar, and all of that will work, right? So instead of destructuring here, now I am destructuring, and you could destructure here also, right? So something like const foo bar. Yeah, but if I would wanted to destructure, then I could have destructured here only, right? But anyways, you could do something like this also. You see? Yeah. Yeah, so that is fine. What if, so this is what it is, foo bar and star as obj, then obj, all the named parameters becomes key value pairs in the object, in the obj. What if this thing was also there, and then you did star as abc? Turns out there will be a separate key called default with the value default. So you see that all the named parameters foo5 bar hello, foo5 bar hello is already there, but this has no name, right? So actually ES modules will automatically add this name. JavaScript will automatically recognize it with this name. So that this is the semantics, that default is automatically added, right? So which means that if like this you want to do, then you could do something like foo bar. Yeah, that is fine. Foo bar is something like this is fine. And if you wanted to see that default thing, then you could do something like abc dot default. It is available, right? And you will see that this abc dot default is bar, right? So individually, if you want to access all the three, then you can access like this also, which earlier we did like simply like default and then foo comma bar in curly braces. The same thing you can do something like this also. Okay. And yeah, we discussed earlier that instead of export const foo, export const bar, you could simply have const foo const bar and then later do export foo and bar. And again, this foo bar curly braces, this is not an object, this is just a syntax to export it, just like there is a syntax to import it. So if you export it like this, then you can import it like this. And obviously if you simply do export const foo, export const bar, then also the syntax will work. So as we discussed earlier, that both of them are exactly the same in case of exporting. So again, you import foo bar which is exported, and then that is 5 and hello, that is fine. Next, export default. So this is what we were discussing. You could also have something called default export, and if you do that, then you don't need curly braces. Whatever you put name directly, that is whatever you default exported. And here whatever abc xyz, whatever name you give, that name you can give, because there is no default export has no particular name. For named export we have names. For default export we don't have any particular name for that export. And again, you could use all of them in combination also, which means that you could use export const foo, export const bar, export default at the same time. You could also do export default this, and then after that you don't use export, you simply write const foo const bar, and here you write export in curly braces foo bar. That will also work. Same thing, right? And then you can do something like the default export I am tracking in obj, and then foo bar are named, so that I have to give that name foo bar, and then everything will work fine. Obj, that whatever is default name, that will have the default export, and the named exports will be as per whatever it is given. And you can export default not only object, you can export default anything. So for example, in this case, I'm just export defaulting hello, a string. So in this case, item is just a string. That is fine. You can export a number. That is fine. Again, we saw that in case of CommonJS, if the file was empty and still I wanted to import something, then empty object was imported, right? That is not the case. There we required not import, but anyways, in this case it is not the case. In case of ECMAScript, exactly whatever is default export, whatever is there, you have to exactly use that. Then only it will work. Otherwise, it will throw error. The only way where it will not throw error if you use this syntax star as obj. Understand? So otherwise, if you try to import default, let's say default obj or whatever, import obj from this thing, then also it will give error. Again, if you try in curly braces foo or something, that will also give error. It will say that foo is not defined. If you simply write import obj, then it will say that there is no default export from here. Every time it will give error. But if you write something like this star as obj, then even if it is empty, nothing is exported, then also this obj will be an empty object. It will not throw an error. And again, like CommonJS, here also all the things can be functions, text or anything. So in this case, the default export is a function. Okay, which means that this thing is a function, and that's why it can be called. Without curly braces, it is coming. It is a function. Inside curly braces also it can happen, but then you have to do something like this: export const score, export const sqrt. These are the two methods. Now, if these two functions are there, then I can use in curly braces, because this is like named export, right? So named export can be something like this, and then again we can use it like this. Okay. Yeah. So we will create, I think, some more video on ES modules, because some things I believe is left, but whatever we discussed till now, that should be fine from our point of view, whatever we are going to learn very recently. Okay, so that's all for this video. See you in the next one.